Welcome to Coffee with the Sarlos. We are your hosts of the show, Karen and Kelly Sarlo. Whether you're struggling with grief or you just need answers, we connect you with spirit to find relief, clarity, and direction in life. We can help you move forward.
Kelly Sarlo, I cannot remember the last time that we recorded without Winston.
Me neither. But the leg room is nice.
It is, but I'm going to assume that people watching this on YouTube are like, "Where's
He's alive and well.
Where's the brown dog?"
He's alive and well.
Yeah. Okay. So before this session even starts, for this gentleman that I'm going to create the name Lenny for. Lenny. So that's not the client's real name. Before it started, the guides came in and said to me, "You need to stop typing. You need to put everything down. We have to talk to you about your next client." So I did put my stuff down. I'm all ears. I'm listening. And they said, this person is calling to seek clarity, and to seek different perspectives, but they have so many defense mechanisms going on that while they are trying, they can't get beyond their own defense mechanisms. Mm-hmm. And be the person who sent them to you. So now I'm thinking, oh, okay. So they didn't just find me by searching psychic or psychic medium or something. No, they got sent by a friend. That's another validation right there that I can use in the session. That this Lenny is sent to you from a friend who sees that he can't get any kind of perspective over what's going on other than his own. And that he's so deeply entrenched in his own because it goes right back to his childhood. He can't. And that's where someone has said to him, go talk to her. Talk to your parents who have passed over. Maybe if you just sit and listen, somebody will be able to get through to you. And I thought, okay. And they said, so you're going to have to do a really good job of consent, making sure that he is told over and over again that this is not your opinion and that this is not psychology, this is not therapy, and that you are channeling. You are going to have to say that repeatedly. So I thought, okay, fine.
I love this. I just want to pause for a second because for people who are listening, you jumped into this episode faster than you've ever done before, and that's cool. What I find really remarkable about this is the guide's desire to meet the client's needs, but also the guide's priority to protect you and to really take good care of you as a channeler, right? Mm-hmm. To say look, this is what you need to be prepared for. This is the energy you're about to be hit with. Here's what you can do to help yourself and the client in the process.
Yes.
I just think that's really cool. They're so responsible for loving and taking care of everyone.
Yeah. Thank you. And I can tell you, Kelly, I feel it.
Yeah, and you know what? And I'm not going to call Lenny a shit just yet because I have a feeling this might come out a little bit later. You will later. Yeah, for sure. I felt it. But what I will say is the guide's desire to love and care for the humans, even when we are acting like little shits.
Yeah, that's right. And I love you're pointing that out because what they're saying to me is how important it is to create safety for him.
Yeah, it's just good parenting.
Yes. And to give him the guidelines and to explain to him and to communicate and to stay emotionally regulated while I'm doing it. They're giving me a heads up so that I, like you said, I'm in a good position to be a professional, to parent when necessary, like all of those things. Mm-hmm. And to me, these are my bosses. Mm-hmm. These are my, if you want to call them my coworkers, however you want to word all of that. This is a relationship with them. Mm-hmm. That's why I wanted to start this session off because it is such a perfect example of how we illustrate that this is communication and relationship. Channeling is not just getting a message and repeating it. Mm-hmm. That's part of it because you have to have accuracy, but you also have to have the relationship with your team on the other side. Mm-hmm. It's not magic. It's not tricks.
Cool.
Okay. So let's step right in then. So Lenny is seeing me over Zoom. And at the beginning of the session, I greeted him and I said, "Hi, Lenny." I said, "I'm going to go through my consent process with you." And I said, "I want you to pay particular attention to it today." And he goes, "Oh, okay. Yeah." And I said, your guides came in at the beginning of the session and told me a little bit about what you're going through. And he kind of looks at me like, I don't think so. Like this. And he goes, okay, I guess that's interesting, like this. So he's got, I'm paying attention to his comments and his behavior. And I went through the consent process and told him, you're in control. You get to ask questions. You get to direct. This is channeling. This is not an opinion. And I said, did you hear that? And he goes, I heard you. And I said, do you understand it? And
write that down.
And he goes, yes. And I said, are you recording? And he goes, oh, I forgot. Give me a minute. So he hits record and I went, I'm going to start consent again.
Nice.
And he went, no, you're wasting my time. And I went, don't you worry about that, Lenny. It took me 3 minutes to get through consent. I promise you the 3 minutes at the end of the hour. You will have those 3 minutes, sir. And he
okay, hang on. Just for the a-holes or who are going to argue when they book a session going forward, we don't tack on extra time once consent is done. This is a unique situation because the guide said restart. And that is directed from the bosses. Your consent is built in to your hour session.
Thanks, Kelly. Yes.
Yep, because there will be some people who say, you are wasting my time, to which we have choice words for you. Yeah. Karen's often nicer than I am, by the way. If you haven't gathered this.
I think recently I've leveled up to your level.
I'm proud of you.
I'm going to say of setting those boundaries and not people-pleasing people. I've reined in my people-pleaser.
Beautiful.
But the guides, like you said, the guides instructed this. So I'm like, okay, they wanted it on the recording. About the consent process and that about what channeling is versus opinion versus if I'm stepping into giving an opinion, I have to announce I'm giving my own opinion. If he thinks that it's channeling or therapy, that I'm saying I am not a registered therapist because he's going to come back later in the session and he's going to make those statements and I'm going to say, refer back to the beginning of the session.
To which I would say as a life coach, refer to the forms of verbal abuse and the defense mechanisms.
Right, which the guides do in his session. They bring up the defense mechanisms and all of that. Okay, so at the beginning of the session, after we get through consent, I said, what would you like? And he said, he says, I was told just to go open to listen. And I said, okay, so the spirit guides are coming in. And I said, they want to talk to you about your parents. And I said, so I want you to know that your parents are here, that when we move to medium, I will announce it. And I said, however, they're here as a backup because you need to know they're here listening and that they're here to challenge some of the things that you may think with the spirit guides. And he's like, whatever, however you do this, I don't know what you do or how you do it. I said, Lenny, that's fair. What I'm trying to do is educate you about what's happening in the spirit world so you understand the process and what I'm doing. And also, if you want to ask questions, how to ask more well-informed questions. And he goes, oh, I like that. He says, you're educating me? I like that. He said, I can appreciate that. So then the spirit guides downloaded, I call it downloading the file. And I began and I said, the first thing they want to start with is the fact that you're currently in your 40s. I was shocked because I thought he was in his 60s. So I can't go by what he looked like, how he presented. To me, he looked my age in his 60s. And he said, yeah, I'm in my 40s. I had to watch my jaw that it didn't drop just because I was surprised at that. But I was so grateful for the guides telling me.
Karen has a very long track record of not appropriate or proportional reactions to things.
Well, if everybody understands how I get information from the spirit guides, sometimes my appropriate response is to the spirit world. It isn't to the human beings in front of me. It's just that the human beings can't see the spirit world, so they don't get my appropriate reactions. So anyway, let's get back to it. So he says, the spirit guides are telling you to tell him. So this is what I'm saying. Lenny, I said, you are angry with your family. I said, especially since your parents died, but even well before that. And he goes, I am now, yeah. And I said, no, you've been angry with your siblings basically since the moment you were born. And he goes, No. And I said, yes. And he goes, I disagree with you. And I said, that's fine, but I'm channeling.
Also, like, wouldn't, I gotta figure out how to word this. Wouldn't the healthier response be to say, could you elaborate, please?
Exactly.
I would like to understand what you mean by angry since birth. Like,
yes.
He doesn't even know what he's saying no to yet.
That's right.
And I will speak to the people here. I know I'm about to ruin your show for you. That there are so many people out there, specifically like personality types, that have no idea how to get in touch with their anger, don't know that they've been angry their entire lives because they've lived suppressed. And that's the survival mechanism.
Yes.
Not defense mechanism, a survival mechanism, right?
Yeah.
Is that suppression. And so now he's going into forms of denial, forms of then verbal abuse in his communication so that he doesn't actually have to get back in touch with those feelings.
Thank you, Life Coach Kelly.
You're so welcome.
And I'm serious. I'm not being facetious or teasing you. I am serious because you are bringing your skill set to this conversation to help the listeners understand, especially the listeners who are like him that might be like, Karen's a bitch. And I can't believe that. That is her opinion. No, it's not. Mm-hmm. It's 100% channeling. I don't have an opinion about Lenny. I'm just met him.
Well, see, I think that's a hard statement for people to wrap their head around is the idea that a human could refrain from having an opinion.
Right.
Right. So if you're not someone who has ever channeled before or done it ethically with integrity and truly detached and become a hollow bone as a channel, then you wouldn't understand sitting down in front of someone and not having a judgment.
Right.
Or an opinion.
Thank you.
I think that's an assumption that a lot of people will need to challenge today.
Yeah.
That could exist.
Yeah, and I think it's good for them to challenge it, especially if they're going to book an appointment with me at some point for channeling, because that's their shit. Mm-hmm. And that is not my shit because I live the hollow bone.
Yeah.
And I know how to listen to the spirit world. And they're coming from their own place of, I can't imagine a person knows how to do it because I can't.
Yeah.
And that's projection into me.
Which, by the way, is a defense mechanism, ladies and gentlemen.
Exactly.
I also want to illustrate, too, that you may be someone as a listener who books a session and demonstrates unhealthy behavior. And hopefully what you can hear is the amount of understanding and compassion and patience that both the spirit world and we offer as channelers to say, I get where your behavior is coming from. I'm not here taking it personally. I'm not going to use a defense mechanism back on you. I'm going to sit here and do the job that you hired me to do so that you feel safe to work through that shitty behavior.
And I should say, too, that wasn't projection into, that was projection onto.
Yeah.
There's a difference between the two forms of projection.
Correct.
Okay. So, yes, thank you for all of that. So the guides start explaining to Lenny that he's currently angry with his brothers and sisters, that they are not there for him as he's going through taking care of his parents before they passed, their wills and estates when they did pass, end of life care and being for them, where he's got siblings that went, I've got life. I've got things to do. I've got my own relationship with my parents. And I'm handling my grief in my own way. And he's angry that nobody is seeing his needs. Nobody is seeing his parents' needs in both death situations. His siblings aren't responding the way he wants them to. He wants control over their grief processes, their decisions, their relationships with their parents, what they're going through at end of life and post. He wants control over all of that, but cannot see that he wants control. He sees it as, I'm grieving and they're not there for me when I've been there for them their whole lives. And I told him all of that, and he goes, you can see he was just like, what the hell? What do I attack there?
Cool.
What do I defend? What do I, and of course, I can hear thoughts, and the guides are telling me what he's thinking, and they're preparing the response. Because they are always 10 steps ahead of us. That doesn't mean I am. that means the guides are. And then the guides give it to me to channel to him. So then I said to him, hey, I said, give me a moment. I said, I need to download another file. And you can see like he's just freaking annoyed. And I said, can I continue, please? And he said, yes. So then the guides say, okay, we want to explain that through life, especially adult life, he thinks that he's been there for his siblings. He is annoyed because he mentally lists all the time in his head as he's driving around, as he's driving to visit them, as he's going to their house for supper, when he leaves their house, he's always listing all of the things he does for them. But what we want to point out is that it's all the things he's promised them, but he never follows through on. And so he sees his mental list of promises broken as his list of things accomplished. Yeah. And I said, oh boy. I said to the guides, that's a toughie. I said, that sounds like a session for therapy and not channeling. I said, what the hell am I doing with that one? And they said, oh, we want you to tell him. And we are going to give you examples. And we're going to say his youngest sister. We're going to say his oldest brother. There's a good sized family. We're going to give examples of where within his own siblings, not his friends, not at work. We're just staying in the family unit. And we're going to give examples of where he makes promises that he actually wants to cash in on. Where he believes I'm surprised you haven't said anything.
I am suppressing my anger at the moment.
Okay. Where he gives an example of, I told my brother I'd build a fence with him in his backyard. He's going to know exactly what brother that is because he's only got one brother who he promised he'd build a fence. He never built that fence. He never showed up to even bring a coffee. He never showed up even once the fence was done. And once it was done and went out into his brother's backyard to play a game or have a barbecue, he never said nice fence. He saw the fence and purposely said nothing because he knew that he had promised to build it and didn't show up and didn't do it. And so I'm literally able, because of the spirit guides, to give him the example of the fence. And he just sits there and looks at me. And I've got to admit, personally, I was looking forward to seeing his face and to seeing what he does facially and with his body language when he's caught. And the behavior he has, because I wanted to see a narcissist's behavior live right in front of me, where the spirit guides have all of the information, all of the examples, and then they're going to give me the facts. This is your oldest brother, where he goes, well, I don't remember it that way. And I go, well, wait a minute. Is this your oldest brother?
Is that how he?
Yep. And yes, it is my oldest brother. So what? And I go, well, wait a minute. And then the guides go, well, he has 5 kids, 4 boys.
Hey, I'm sorry. Slow down. Are you giving examples or is this exactly?
No, this is exactly.
Okay. Can we break this down then? 'Cause
Yeah.
You're like ripping through this. So he said, I don't remember it that way?
Yes.
Okay, so we are in denial, which is a form of a defense mechanism. And then he says, well, so what? Which is a deflection, right?
Yes.
So now I'm going to set you off on a different trail, Karen.
More verbal abuse.
These are forms of verbal abuse, which is defense mechanisms. Same, right? And then Karen, by the direction of the spirit guides, said, okay, well, let's just keep throwing out some more examples. And that is not Karen making a decision that I, as a channeler, am going to prove myself or my accuracy.
That's right.
That's the guide saying, all right, let's have some fun here and let's give him some more examples that he cannot deny as facts, right? And then you go into the siblings. Go ahead.
And the guides come in and say, okay, and you're divorced? Yep. You have 4 boys and a girl? Yep. You have 2 dogs and a cat? Yep. So he has to give me yes answers to all the facts. And he goes, so what? And I go, well, no, that's my verification system to validate that everything that the guides are giving me. He goes, you're just talking to the spirit world or the dead people or something.
Okay,
and
so now we are trivializing and minimizing.
Another form of verbal abuse. And I said, no, I said, Lenny, I said, this is what science does, hun. I said, you're being dismissive of something that is actually something all humans on Earth use. I said, and certain groups on Earth called science and scientists use formulas, stats, evidence, and truth and validations. And I said, I'm using the same system. I'm using the same processes. And I said, the guides taught me how to do this because of people that want to use the forms of verbal abuse to dismiss. And I said, it's one thing to dismiss me as a person, which I will not tolerate. And I said, and it's another thing to dismiss the entire spirit world when you showed up to listen. And I said, so I will not tolerate that you're going to abuse my coworkers and my bosses or me. And I said, so...
Zero bullying tolerance policy here.
And I said, so I'm going to hit end meeting in 30 seconds if you do not take responsibility, if you do not apologize. And I said, and we're going to go through a little bit of a repair process here in this relationship, or you are getting nothing. And he looked at me like, what?
Yeah. And also nothing means no refund.
That's right.
Your parents are showing up.
Yeah.
The whole realm is showing up as your guides to offer you what you need.
Yeah.
And you're going to sit there and be an irresponsible child about it.
Yeah. So then, and I'll make this brief, we sat together for a couple of minutes where he had to go through a process with me, which I explained, you need to do this. And then he did. So I went through that with him. And then I asked him, do you wish to continue? Are you willing to listen? And I asked specific questions the guides asked me to ask him. And he said yes. So we continued.
Okay. So I will say, maybe prematurely, that's wonderful to hear that there was some level of humility and willingness to stand back and try something different. That is very, very difficult for anyone who has been entrenched in the defense mechanisms, who has experienced a power over, a misuse of power in their life, which obviously he has, if he is this entrenched in defense mechanisms, right?
Absolutely.
So the ability to trust, especially a stranger who, I mean, granted, we have a little bit of a power over people in the sense that they don't know how to verify how and what we're doing, right? So he's put himself in a very vulnerable position, trusting the friend that recommended you.
Yep.
And he's in this moment of truth where he can choose to be humble and try or dig his heels in deeper. So at the very least, this is an important moment.
Absolutely. And it's why I sit still in it as a human. The human me might want to be like end meeting.
Yeah.
See ya.
And that's where the guides are really saying, like, let's do proper relationship repair.
That's correct. And I'm okay. If the guides are saying to me he's going to do it, it's working. It's part of his growth. It's part of his process. I'm there for the healthiness when somebody's willing to finally turn that switch, even if it's for the next 10 minutes, I'm there. I'm okay. So then he said, can you just keep going? Are you going to channel my parents eventually? And I said, I am. I said, your mom and dad want to come in and they actually want to say to you that right from birth, they withheld love. Right from your birth, they use breadcrumbing you. And he goes, I don't know what breadcrumbing means.
Okay, that's a moment of humility. That's great.
And I said, okay. And I took the pause and I said, here's what it means. And here's some beautiful resources to understand breadcrumbing. Dr. Romney's YouTube channel, Dr. Les Carter. Like they gave him a whole bunch, books, all kinds of things to be able to go and understand breadcrumbing. And he said, he thanked me for that. And he just said, continue. So then his mom in particular starts to explain how both parents breadcrumbed him significantly. And that as a result of that, his entire life, he people pleases his mom and dad constantly, to the point that he's abusive to his siblings, to the point that he pits his siblings against each other.
Okay, so can you connect the dots for people to understand?
Please his parents. To please his parents. So whatever his mom's kind of trying to have happen, and he's listening all the time to her, what her needs are, what she's upset about, what's mom sad about, what's mom mad about, what does mom want, then he goes out and he maneuvers that between siblings.
So that he can look like the hero.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that he can go back to mommy and say, oh, I spoke to so-and-so and I told them this. And then I went over to the other sibling and I told them that. And so literally, she now realizes, wow, this is working for me. I have a subordinate, I'm the boss, I'm the director, and I have this, this manager who's going out and managing all these other children for me to get what I want, but I don't have to do it myself. So nobody's coming up to me and mad at me as mommy.
No, and you can be as dysregulated as you want as a mom because my little boy is just going to fix it for me.
Yes. And I said, so what has happened over all of these decades then is that your siblings are just sick of you. Your siblings are tired of the manipulation and the behavior. They're tired of the way you breadcrumb them, the way she breadcrumbs you. And he goes, but I don't breadcrumb them. I always show up. And I said, no. I said, you show up at your sibling's house for free meals. You show up at your sibling's house because it's a bed instead of a hotel. You show up because you get to play with nieces and nephews and dogs and whatever, and you have fun. You get to show up so that you can take pictures for Facebook and Instagram. You show up because you want somebody to be there when you die if you need somebody else. This is always what's in it for you. And I said, so much so that when you get in the car, you literally list in your head all of the things that you've done for your siblings, but you never once list that your siblings got the beer that you like, or your siblings went out and made you your favorite dinner. You don't list their things. They do for you. Is that accurate? And he sits there and he goes, I got to think about that for a minute.
Well, that's good.
Yep. And I said, please do. And he goes, oh, you mean right now? And I said, I'll be quiet.
Okay. So for anyone who doesn't realize, that's called accountability.
Yep.
So that he can't promise, which we'll just call future faking here.
Yes.
Right? Because he's future faking everyone. I promise to, I will, and then he doesn't show up.
Yep.
Okay.
And so then he sits there and he goes, you're right about the mental list. He goes, I do it constantly. Mm-hmm. He goes, I do it even when I'm before I'm even going to town. He says, or I'm going to visit any of them. He says, you're right. I'm in constant mental lists. He goes, and when I think about my apartment and my house, in all the different places I've lived in life, he says, I got lists everywhere. He goes, you're right about lists. He says, but it's making me think about even the other lists, like the lists that I do at work. And he goes, the list of where I expect coworkers to do things, but I don't do things back for my coworkers. And I went, okay. And he goes, and then I got panicky because now I'm realizing some of the situations I've got myself into at work. And he goes, I'm starting to realize that I've lied at work to get myself out of those situations. I've thrown people under the bus and I've lied. And because I've been in a position of authority over them, they've been transferred, they've lost jobs, they've quit, they've gone on stress leaves because of my behavior. And I'm like, yes. And I said, he goes, and wait, he says, I think I'm understanding that you're giving me the example of my family because this is me panicking that I don't really have any family anymore. But the only reason I have coworkers is because where I work, they have to supply them.
Yep.
And he goes, I think I'm starting to piece together that nobody has to actually force my siblings to actually like me or tolerate me or put up with me for the paycheck or the pension, right? Mm-hmm. And all of these things. And I went, exactly. And he goes, I ruminate a lot. And he goes, what can you tell me more about that? And I said, well, that's the anxiety and that's the depression. And I said, because you're always seeing the lack of, so it's depressing. Those thoughts are depressing. Nobody loves me as much as I'm loving them, even though that's not what you're doing. And he goes, it's like the reality that I think I have, I don't even have, right, Karen? Mm-hmm. And I went, yes. And that's why the guides would say it's important for us to help you see it. But the most important thing you're going to hear coming out of this session today is how badly you need therapy. Because if you don't go to therapy to process this session, it's going to be a whole lot easier for you to go back to the rumination and the lists and the anger about the siblings and then doing whatever you want. And he goes, what do you mean whatever I want? I said, you're fucking them over in the will anyway. And he went, what? And I said, your parents are saying that you're just screwing them over in the will anyway. There's enough wiggle room with some finances that you're just making sure that they don't get their share. And he went, my parents know that?
Fucking duh.
And I went, yeah. I said, but more importantly, your spirit guides know that. I said, your soul knows that. I said, if you're having a little bit of a shit that your parents know, I said, you should be having a major blowout in your bowels that the spirit guides know. I said, because they're the boss of your soul. Like your soul in that spirit group know what you do from lifetime to lifetime. And
there's a meme on the internet of Kermit the Frog sipping tea, and it says, but that's none of my business. And it's just like, to me, that is you and I in channeling sessions, where it's like the information comes in, we deliver it, we have no emotional attachment to it because it's just your message. Yeah. And then it's just like, you could take a sip and it's like, but that's none of my business. Yes.
Thank you, Kelly. And I think the very energy that I have in those sessions about that, like, oh, geez, Lenny, if you're worried about your parents' responses, that's fine, because when you do cross over, you will have to sit down with them and discuss what you did. Mm-hmm. And you will, it will all have to come clean. But that's minor compared to sitting with your original, truest, highest level of spirit guides. Yeah. Where they sit with love and compassion for you, but they're going to hold you accountable to every single thing you've done. Yeah. And it's all under a microscope to help you heal, not to punish you. Yeah. And he goes, oh. And I said, so the forms of verbal abuse that you've done in this session, to me, the dismissiveness, the trivializing, the withholding, the avoiding, like all of the forms of verbal abuse, I said, it is very important for you to know what it is you're doing, because you've done all these things to your siblings and your coworkers and partners, everybody. And I said, there is a book by Patricia Evans called The Verbally Abusive Relationship that is critical for you to understanding your own thinking, the way that you speak to others, the way that you think of others, the way that you treat people, and the way you're treating your own self. Mm-hmm. And I said, she lays that out perfectly in different sections of the book. And I said, it'll be the best $20, because I think her book is like $20. It's not expensive. It's a paperback. I said, it's the best book you will ever buy. And I said, but make sure that as you're working through it, you're in therapy with a therapist that actually sorts through those forms of verbal abuse. So then, now this is kind of like really bringing us to the end of the session, the end of his, I think he had booked an hour, and his parents said, we did these things to you because we weren't even happy in our own marriage. And that's like a whole other session of the fact that because we don't even do anything healthy to be in the relationship or to leave it, has an impact on all of you as children. Mm-hmm. And we've come today because we've done our work on the other side to say, we are not the same parents and we are sorry. Mm-hmm. We can be here finally in accountability. But that is one of the things that we never did. Even though we lived to be in our 80s, we never took accountability for how we stayed in that relationship and how we behaved in it and parented from that position. Mm-hmm. And as a result, you and all of your siblings have your own levels of verbal abuse, attachments, avoidance issues, defense mechanisms. And these are all the things you're on earth to work out. And he says to me, oh, he says, okay, I think I'm getting something. And I said, what's that? I can think of my friend's conversation with me, and this is exactly what she said I'd get. And I went, oh. And he said to me, oh, she sees you regularly. And she said, this is exactly what I needed. But when she started explaining these things to me, she went, never mind. Let Karen and the spirit guides do it. Because you're going to need all of the evidence and all of the other stuff I can't give you that you need them for and your parents for. Mm-hmm.
That's neat. And I want to say, just to clarify for listeners, I mean, I'm sure some people resonated with this podcast with themselves or with other people like this Lenny in their lives. You don't need a medium to educate you about these things. You can pick up Patricia Evans' book. You can research healthy authors on attachment styles and everything. What this friend was doing for Lenny is understanding that he specifically needs the information to come from someone else, to draw those parallels, to sit in safety that you created for him in order to break down those barriers, right? Like, so many of us can do the work with a therapist or by picking up a book and digest these concepts and challenge our own assumptions and our belief systems and create healthy new ones. And for other individuals, we really do need the insight, the tools, and the accountability to get it done.
And the examples, or sorry, did you say that
Insight.
too? Yeah. Okay. Sorry.
Yeah, that's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. I hope people understand, like, it's never to create a dependency, right?
Yeah.
If you're seeing professionals for anything, whether you see a chiropractor, a massage therapist, a medium, a doctor, it's not ever supposed to be about, you should see me for the rest of your life. It's about, how can we help you get to the healthiest place and know how to take care of yourself so you can just come see me as needed when you need more resources, right? But that you can be self-sufficient to the best of your ability.
Yeah, exactly.
Cool.
The session ended on a far different note than how it started, and even how we were at different times during the session, because I'm not giving every single example of where I had to step in with proof. I've picked a couple instead of every single one that he needed. It took patience, and it took being emotionally regulated myself to be able to keep him in the conversation, so that he could have his own emotions, he could go into his own feelings with a person who was regulated and non-judgmental.
Beautiful. Well, you did a great job for him.
Thank you. Thanks, Kelly.
Thanks for sharing.
You're very welcome.
Thank you for listening to Coffee with the Sarlos. If you enjoyed the show today, please be sure to subscribe on your podcast platform and leave a review. New shows will air every other Saturday.